It's Sports Bizarre.
Welcome aboard, everyone.
Anyone isn't happy, we call it all off immediately.
The hunt for the weirdest.
There you go. Can you put out a fact sheet with this?
Blowed my mind.
I can't keep up.
Strangest.
Catastrophic, amazing, bizarre. Multiple layers of stupidity coming together.
What could go wrong?
Most unbelievable.
It's like a Coen Brothers movie.
Stories to ever occur.
They're only going to get weirder from here.
Get comfy, everyone.
Some good, some bad, and some just bizarre, which we love.
In the world of sport.
How many chimneys could you do in a day?
I've researched the Tour de France, not chimney sweeps.
Sports Bizarre.
Right, police are called in.
For the players.
Dennis Rodman is telling you to calm down. Testicle soup.
Can I just stop you for a second?
Don't act like you've never done this. I feel like once again we've strayed away from what I've researched.
It's time for the leaders of the hunt.
An old couple who've got our spark back.
It's Titus O'Reilly and Mick Molloy.
Welcome back to Sports Bizarre for part 5. Can you believe it? Part 5 of our ongoing examination of the dodgy road to Qatar and FIFA's involvement. Hello, Titus. I was just staggered where we've come from. Where are we going? Where are we right now? Can you recap for us?
Well, where
Where'd
we are,
we leave it?
I think we thought this would be 2 episodes, and we're
Yeah,
now
well,
into about
no.
5. So it's and then we're recording this while the World Cup's on.
Correct.
So and
could be another
spoiler
couple.
alert. FIFA seemed just as off the ball.
God.
Like, it's amazing. So where we were is we'd gotten where our story had got on in the first 4 episodes is going right back to the start of FIFA, how they'd got here. We'd got to the point where Sepp Blatter had been president. He'd then steered through a few controversies, got to the World Cup point. In 2010, they appointed the World Cup for 2018 and 2022.
First time ever, two
at once.
And what could go wrong?
We covered all the stuff about, they'd had issues with MasterCard, they'd screwed them over to get Visa in, they'd then done these dodgy deals around the 2018 and 2022, the Qatar and Russian World Cups.
Yep.
And so the point of the story right now is we're getting into 2011 and they've announced Qatar and Russia.
Yep.
So that's just been announced.
A couple of bombshells, is that fair to say?
And look, everyone's been proven wrong. Qatar's been a massive success.
How many people have jumped ship? Morgan Freeman, David Beckham. I
Yeah.
mean, they were all part of the Americans and the English.
Do you reckon they've Yeah, that's right. They're all against
Why
it. And
would
then now
they
they're
do that? Can you
I
think?
think it's called money. And I just want to put out there too, you and I are very willing to take Qatarian money.
We'll stop this right now. We'll stop this mid-podcast if the price is right.
There doesn't need to be an episode 6 Qatarians.
Everything is about money. Everything from...
There was a quote from... Do you remember that cartoon Calvin and Hobbes that was in all these things? But there's a quote from that where he says, what depresses me, that everyone has a price. He says, what depresses me is how low it is. And it's so true with some of these guys, right? Like,
what cartoon was that?
It was Calvin and Hobbes. It was an old American one. But
I'm a Fred Bassett man. Really like Fred Bassett.
You're a big Fred Bassett. The biggest influence on your comedy career.
Yeah, he was an handicap.
Handicap.
A wife-beating, lazy drunk.
I used to read that.
How funny can that be?
I used to read that as a kid and it perplexed me then.
Hagar the Horrible. Remember Hagar the Horrible?
I remember Hagar the Horrible.
It was a bit demeaning to Vikings.
Andy Cat, though, he was always drunk asleep on the couch. I remember most of it. Easy to draw.
It's like an autobiography. What about Snake Tales? Were you a Snake Tales man?
I wasn't really Snake Tales, man.
What happened to the comic section in the paper?
They got rid of it just recently.
Why?
Well, I think there's barely newspapers now. So. Anyway.
All right, where were we?
So
corruption, money,
So
FIFA.
corruption, money, FIFA. FIFA have awarded Qatar, Russia, the dust is not settled. Everyone's furious on that. So they're rolling into 2011, and in the lead up to, there's going to be a 2011 FIFA president election. Sepp Blatter has not been challenged for the presidency since 2002. So suddenly this year is important to him. The person that's going to challenge him is Mohammed bin Hammam, who was the guy who lent him the plane. He's a Qatari. He lent the plane to Sepp Blatter in 1998 to get him elected.
It's 2IC? Is he?
He was the head of the AFC, the Asian Football Conference, and then he was high up in FIFA.
Yeah.
And so he'd been aligned to Sepp Blatter, had a
like
lot
a
of
capo.
money. Yeah, he was. and he had helped secure the games for Qatar.
Yeah.
So suddenly Blatter's facing this guy his, and unlike some of the clean skins or cleaner skins he'd battled for other presidencies, this guy
knows how
the game works. So rolling into this, it wasn't helped by Sepp Blatter did an interview where he kind of claimed that racism could just be, if there was racism on the pitch, he says, look, whatever's happened, whoever's affected and has the racism comment made to them by another player.
Yes.
This is a game, we're in a game, and at the end of the game, we shake hands. So he basically says, people should just get over racism on the pitch if there's a handshake after. This outrageous.
We have seen this before, though. You did cover this in the, what was the game where they were spitting on each other, and at the end they were shaking hands?
Oh, yeah, that's right. That was the 60s Celtic versus Racing Club. That's right. But this is 2001. He says this. He gets in all this trouble. David Cameron, who's then Prime Minister, comes out and says there's horrible anti-racism campaigners are coming out and criticising him. FIFA, just all they do in response is... they put a picture up of Blatter hugging the South African politician. Do you remember Tokyo Sex Whale?
Well, I would remember Tokyo Sex Whale.
That was his name.
That's like his porn name?
I think it's Tokyo Sewale or something like that, but it is written Sexwale.
Yeah.
Do you remember that name?
No, I don't.
Oh, yeah, so he was...
Go Google it.
He was a politician from South Africa.
Do not Google that. Here you go. Tokyo Sex Whale. No.
So Blatter just puts a picture of him hugging him because he's black. So that was his response,
Well, there you go.
Rio Ferdinand, the former Manchester United defender, I think he's still playing at the time, he starts getting into a fight on Twitter with Blatter, of which Blatter starts responding.
Wow.
And just getting stuck into him.
He's like the Elon Musk of his day.
Yeah, so he starts shaming, like Rio Ferdinand says, do you think just putting a picture of you and a black man's going to cover up what you've said? and Blatter decides, well, I'll just get on my high horse and go, hey, that's not just a black man. You call him by his name. It's Tokyo Sex Whale. He's done tremendous work against racism and apartheid in Africa. So he starts getting stuck in. So this is not really what he wants rolling into the presidential election, right?
Not great.
So suddenly, though, he's faced with Mohammed bin Haman, who's this guy who, unlike all the other guys, knows how to get elected.
He knows the ropes. He knows how the system works.
He's like, all this other stuff is happening in the background, but at the time, our dear friend Sepp Blatter doesn't know this is happening.
Right.
And this would kill off a lesser man. So our good friends Chuck Blazer and Jack Warner.
Oh, here they come.
The American and the Trinidad guy who control the central and
they worked it out really
North
quickly
American,
where the seat of power
that's
was.
right. So they've been loyal to Sepp Blatter. These are the guys that are taking all the money, and they are like big involved in the buying off of World Cups and things like that. They had, we asked when we left Chuck Blazer, I think he'd been visiting Putin. And Putin had offered him photos for his travel blog, remember?
Travel blog, Chuck and Friends?
Yeah, Chuck and Friends.
You showed me a picture of Chuck Blazer with Nelson Mandela on a 21-hour flight, and they sat together on a private plane.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
Yeah.
If you have a look at that photo and look at Nelson Mandela, this is a man who spent how long in jail? And I think he was more comfortable in that jail cell
than he was
than on that 21-hour flight with Chuck Blazer. Have a look at the look on his face.
Well, the thing is, so Blazer gets back from Moscow and he gets an email from Jack Warner, So Jack Warner's the president of CONCACAF, the Central and North American and Caribbean thing. And obviously all this time Chuck Blazer's been his right-hand man. Like he's the general secretary. So the email from Warner says, look, Blazer, you're going to get some payment soon. You've been asking about this payment. And the payment was when they agreed to stitch it up so South Africa got the World Cup.
Yes.
What had happened is Warner had got $10 million from South Africa. And then $1 million of that was owed to Chuck Blazer.
Mr. 10%.
Yeah.
I think was his nickname.
So Blazer hasn't seen this, even though it's now getting on a bit from it. And he's But he's not. It was 6 years earlier. But he's not that worried because there's so much money floating around between these guys.
Yeah.
And he figures out, I think the reason was, and it was true, the reason was South Africa had figured it was it was getting hard to work out how to get the money, the bribe, because moving $10 million, as we've discussed through these things, is hard. They were having a bit of trouble. So finally they managed to figure out a way to get the money to Chuck Warner. And so Warner finally gets his email saying it's coming. And then finally some money comes in, and the amount is $205,000 comes, and it gets sent to Blazer. So Blazer gets the check, and normally he would send it to his bank in the Cayman Islands. And I mentioned this in the early one about the problem always is not being bribed, but then hiding the money, right? Yeah. So normally, but what he did this day is instead he was in his apartment in Trump Town. Instead of sending it to the Cayman, he just took it down to a bank. He was with Merrill Lynch. He just took it down to Merrill Lynch, which was near him, and deposited it there.
Idiot.
And so he didn't really think much about it, right? So what had happened here is that meant he was suddenly on the Americans finally pick him up and go, what's this money? Because they were watching him.
Sure.
They'd started to worry. Meanwhile, Mohammed bin Hammam, he's campaigning. And unlike all the others who challenge, he knows where it is. He knows how it works. He'd got Blatter across the line in 1998. He'd been in this world forever. He wasn't the European Western guy who seemed like, you're seeing this clash in Qatar now where it's like the Western values versus the rest of the world. So he just says to Warner, he convinces Warner, swap your loyalty from Sepp Blatter to me. I'm the future. I know you've been with...
Yeah.
And Warner agrees. He says, "Okay, I'll let you come to the Caribbean. We're having a big conference, all the Caribbean Union members. You can come address them.
Wow.
And we'll also, and before, remember, he'd stopped other people addressing his forums.
Right.
But now he's saying, so this is the shift. And then he knows the minute this is going to come out, this is going to show to Sepp Blatter, we're no longer on your side, right? So Chuck Blazer finds out about this, and usually Warner and him work in lockstep, but he hasn't agreed on this.
He's hearing about it for the first time.
Yeah, so they've had these money problems with the bribe, and then now he's hearing...
I don't like where this is going.
So he rings Warner and goes, Jack Warner, he rings and goes, what are you doing?
What's happening?
Did I miss a meeting? We should have discussed this, like, this is a big move for us. And, I think Sepp Blatter's still the one to back.
Sure.
And Jack Warner's like... I don't have to run it. I'm the president. This is what we're doing, all this.
Jack Warner's crossing the line. Is he drunk with power at this stage?
Jack Warner just wants money so much. And I think he thinks Sepp Blatter, he's just been the president that's handed over the World Cup to, even though he's done the dodgy deal, he knows that Sepp Blatter's taken a beating over Qatar and everything. So he's like, the tide's turning.
He's not going to survive
Let's
this.
pick the new winner, right? At this conference where bin Hammam comes and speaks, before he comes, he pays $1.6 million into a bank account controlled by Warner, and Warner then starts handing out at the conference. He gets up and speaks and leaves, and then Warner arranges for every delegate there to get $40,000 cash in an envelope.
For what?
To support bin Hammam.
What? So when you check in and you go to your room and it's just there on the end of the bed?
There was a thing.
Like a mint on the pillow?
He said go in and saw one of the people that worked for Warner, one of his sort of, secretaries or, EAs and admin people.
Okay, there's no art to this.
And people are saying, this is not how they normally do things, right? So people are saying,
it's just a cash payment.
I've got to go back to America. I can't go back with 40 grand cash in my luggage because you got to declare above a certain amount. So they're all like annoyed about it as much. They're like, this isn't how we do bribes normally. Normally we've got a level of sophistication. Blazer's furious because Blazer's like, one, I don't agree with swapping our loyalty from Sepp Blatter, but two, this is too obvious.
This is crass.
Normally we do it through the Cayman Islands and all
gifts,
10 different banks. We don't just hand out. Normally he's waited 6 years.
It's a brown paper bag with 40 grand in it.
It's just, and hand it to a whole bunch of people, right? So Blazer's just furious. It gets out that a lot of the delegates are not happy about this, mainly not the bribery. One, the switching from Sepp Blatter, but secondly, just the, bribe me, but bribe
take me out to dinner. Buy me flowers. Don't just go, the money's on the dresser. Let's go.
Let's go, exactly. So Jack Warner comes in the second day of the conference after they've handed out the bribes, and he stands up in front
This is
of
just
them
quickly. We're now just at flat out.
all.
There's even whatever kind of.
This is just we're away
This is
now.
the cash.
So
Sorry.
Warner gets up. Here's people are unhappy about this. Jack Warner gets up and says, in front of them all, "I know that there are people who believes they are more pious than thou. If you are pious, go to church, friends. But the fact is that our business is our business. We come in the room here, we cuss and disagree and rave and rant. But when we leave here, our business is our business, and that is what solidarity is all about." It's like a mafia
It's so
speech,
mafia.
isn't it?
This
It's like Hyman Roth in The Godfather Part 2, This is the business we chose, don't complain about it.
We're all cool.
Yeah. So he says that. For Blazer, though, this is just the final straw. They're him and Warner, he got Warner elected to be president.
Yeah,
He'd been the architect behind this. They'd both made a fortune. Their loyalty to Sepp. For this was the final straw. The corruption was too obvious for him. Everyone knew about it, and Warner had not run it past him. So Blazer makes this decision, I'm going to back Sepp Blatter. So he picks up the phone and rings Jerome Valcke, who's the General Secretary of FIFA. Remember, he was the one that was the marketing guy that the judge criticised in the FIFA MasterCard thing as being dishonest and who stepped down, only to be hired back by Sepp Blatter to be his 2IC.
Hey, he spent his time.
Yeah,
he did the time. He did the crime.
2 seconds. So Blazer rings him and tells him everything. He says Mohammed bin Hammam has been bribing. Warner's gone over. He's been bribing. He's handed out 40 grand. Valcke summons the top attorney, Marco Villager from FIFA, and the head of security as well, who's an Australian named Chris Eaton, to his office. And they find him smiling and happy. And they go, "What are you so happy?" And he tells them about the bribes that Blazer's just told him about and says, we can get rid of bin Hammam now, this next election.
That's it. He's cooked.
Blatter doesn't have to worry. So they leap on it. They announce that there's going to be, they publicly announce there's going to be investigation into these bribes by a former US federal prosecutor and who's a FIFA legal committee member. And they say, we're going to look into this. CONCACAF turn around under Warner and try and sack Blazer. So it's all their partnerships are that Blazer is being held up by everyone as a hero.
He's come clean. He's blown the whistle.
Yeah,
he's a whistleblower.
He's a whistleblower. He's being held up at as this guy who's doing all the right things and everything. Warner's now seen as the bad guy. The investigation starts. Bin Hammam says it's an ethics committee investigation from FIFA.
Here they come. Here comes the cavalry.
He's charged with offering bribes for votes. He withdraws from the presidential election. He says, "It saddens me that standing up for causes that I believe in has come at a great price." The vice president of the Bahamas Football Association produces photographic evidence of the $40,000 bribes.
Is that right?
So he's obviously happy to help Sepp Blatter out.
And where's Sepp? He's always one out,
Sepp's always
one back.
He is in the mafia they
doesn't
talk
have to do
about
it.
barriers of levels. There's always a buffer between, So Warner's suspended and Hermana's, they're both suspended. Warner sends through a thing and says, "I'm stepping down. I'm resigning from all international soccer." And FIFA say that they note his service. They say, as a consequence of Mr. Warner's self-determinated resignation, all ethics committee's procedures against him have been closed. The presumption of innocence is maintained.
Oh, stop it.
This is repeated, right?
You go quietly.
If you go quietly, we'll stop the investigation. We'll it's a total political witch hunt to just get
It's
rid
a
of
win-win for you right now.
So Blatter, once again, has seen off his enemies. He's won. There's then on May 31st of May, the election that was going to happen is the summit's being held. The FA, the Football Association, and the Scottish Football Association, the English and the Scottish, call for the presidential election to be postponed. they call for an independent external party to make recommendations regarding improved governance and compliance procedures for all of FIFA. So they're
Has there
saying,
ever been a third party
No.
investigation?
So, well, yeah, they have, but they've never gone anywhere. So this is like Sepp's just done they've had the 2010 decision for Russia and Qatar,
Yes.
rolling into the main competitor being rolled, accused
Jack
of
Warner being
corruption.
sent back
but
to the
yeah,
Caribbean.
meanwhile, Sepp Blatter's like, nothing to do with me,
Right.
right? You know. In fact, the ethics inquiry found Sepp Blatter, even though he knew about the bribes when he found out about it, did nothing wrong, did everything right.
That was the
you
official
know,
finding. Who knew?
Yeah.
Well done.
The Football Association.
Which operates independently of FIFA? Does it? The ethics committee?
Not really. The Football Association put a proposal to the Congress, the FIFA Congress, to delay the presidential vote because there still has to be a vote, even though Sepp's the only candidate, saying this is so corrupt on every level, everywhere. We need to delay the vote and get other candidates.
Okay.
Now, this is where you'd think, oh, well, the Football Association, they're huge, the English Football Association,
Yes.
and you've got all of Europe, mainly Western countries, all saying, yep, we've got to delay this. This is terrible. And so when you grow up like we're in Australia and, you hear all this recovered from a Western perspective, you think, yeah, everyone hates Sepp Blatter, they're corrupt, and everyone hates FIFA. But this is where, we've shown time and time again, Sepp knows that's not where the numbers are.
He knows where the votes
The numbers are. So anyway, when the FA put this vote to delay the presidential vote, it's opposed by 172 of the 206 voters. So that it's not even close. Like Sepp still has.
No, let's go.
Which is what's happening with FIFA now, right? Everyone's saying, well, why are they letting the beer being banned? Why are they banning the rainbow armbands and all that? And people can't, from a Western perspective, go, this makes no sense.
Yeah.
But they know we're going to look after you.
Sure.
So the proposal that the FA put together was then criticised by members from the Congolese Association Football Federation, the Benin Football Federation, the Haitian Football Federation, the Fiji Football Association, and the Cyprus Football Association. So this is the one vote, one country, they're all kicking back about it. Blatter then runs unopposed in the ensuing presidential election. He wins for a fourth term.
Well done, Sepp.
He says he won't run again for president. That's a lie. He does. He then gets this point where he's seen off all these guys and he's gone through, and FIFA's on the nose though. Qatar Russia's put on the nose, and now Warner and all this stuff happening is now seen as corruption.
Outside of the organisation, the world is starting
The world's
to go,
really paying
what
attention.
the
And he's
hell
got sponsors asking questions. He announces upon his election as president that he's going to be putting in place a whole new corporate government. He's going to strengthen the transparency. He's going to strengthen the ethics committee. He's going to clean up FIFA. This is what Sepp says. He says he's going to sweep it down. Chuck Blazer survived too. Now, he gets forced off the CONCACAF executive because he's made some enemies there through Warner and everything, but he's still on the FIFA executive committee. Except there's that payment I mentioned that he made back in New York. So just after all this goes down, a task force from the US Justice Department has uncovered his financial dealings. They're looking into...
Were they already looking into FIFA, or
They're
were they
already
looking into
FIFA. It's quite an interesting story. There's some good books on this. So the way the US get onto it is they start to notice that there's their interest is the soccer authorities are basically cleaning money like a corrupt organisation would, like criminal organisation would, using the US banks and various things, and they start to look into it. Right. It then happens that when the US... People say, they launched their big investigation into FIFA because they lost the US lost to Qatar. Really, I think more realistically, it was already on foot. I think if the US had have won, they probably would have then quietened the thing down, but it was already on foot. Yes. They were already looking into all this stuff. So they had this amazing IRS guy who knew all these loopholes not loopholes, but he knew the law so well. He knew how you could surveil people's bank records there, and because he was at the IRS, he could pull their tax returns.
Had he done Rico? He'd done this stuff
Rico
before.
gets brought into this, so yeah, he'd done lots of this before. He'd worked with the FBI and various other
On mafioso
intelligence
cases.
on all sorts of things. They had all these people that had worked on those and other things. He'd worked on all these things, and this guy,
He's been training for this all his life.
all his life, and he was a big soccer fan too, so he wanted to work
right.
on this. Well, when other people mentioned the names, he was like. Other people were like, who? And he knew all these people.
Yeah.
What he had done is he'd set up this watch list, basically, which is if the money never went through America, he couldn't pick them up.
He couldn't do anything.
And he could go and request bank records in the Cayman Islands or other places. But those banks are often so corrupt that if someone goes and says, I want Mick Molloy's accounts, I'm the FBI, I want Mick Molloy's account.
Don't do that, by the way.
Don't do that. Yeah, everything's in cash with you. It's all under the bed. They would and ask for the records. They would then go and tell you and go,
So
hey, they're looking into you.
It's tipped off that you're being
Yeah.
investigated.
So he knew I can't look at. He was waiting because once you then get the payment, then you can start unraveling all these things. He'd also done a bunch of stuff. So Warner, being the head of US football, was Blazer. He was on his record. They now had got this thing and they'd started looking at it and they'd found out he'd never paid tax for about the previous 20 years.
Right, this is a guy living in Trump Tower, with two apartments,
tens of millions of dollars,
traveling
going
around
through
the world on private
FIFA
jets.
execo, and he hasn't he hasn't lodged a tax return, and he's made a deposit suddenly. So it's like, where'd you get that money then? If you're not,
He's wide open.
he's wide open.
I think we found a way in.
The FBI confront him and they offer him a deal about a whole bunch of stuff around bribery because by this point they've started to really map out his financial movements of money and everything. Like with all this, even though we're going for like episode after episode, I'm skipping over so much stuff because there's just so much stuff going on. The FBI, and at this point you've got to remember, he's riding high because he's seen as the guy who blew the whistle on Warner.
He's the good guy.
Yeah. So the FBI one day confront him and they say, we know you haven't paid tax. We know you've done all this. We're looking into all this stuff with soccer and the US financial system being used to move money around.
Yeah.
You help us or we'll throw you to the wolves. You will be in jail.
So what have you done, like a lifetime of jail?
Oh, yeah, he would have. And
he's gone.
And he's gone. Yeah, and he's a massively overweight guy, not fit. You know, he gets around on a mobility scooter. He's lived a life of, like a top exec for all. Like, he doesn't want to.
Yeah.
He agrees to begin. This is in December 2011 at this meeting. He agrees to begin working undercover for the FBI.
This story is just insane. So he's flipped.
He's flipped.
So Chuck Blazer, who cahoots with Jack Warner, up to his eyeballs
in
in
everything.
To get, he's the weak link. He's the whistleblower. Now they're onto him.
And
he's gone. He's turned.
He's turned. So he is.
Well, he's good though because he knows where all the bodies are buried.
He knows where all the bodies are buried and all this sort of stuff. So he gets to a point when we'll get into it. He actually starts wearing. They put a microphone and record in his on a key fob, and they say when you go and meet with people, chuck that on the table, like your keys on the table, and we can record the conversation. He says someone as rich as me doesn't just throw their keys on the table. They get an argument and they go, you have to do it.
Are they the keys to his mobility scooter, or are they the keys
one
to
of his many properties around the world?
So no one would know. No one would have any
this
idea.
This happens in December 2011. No one knows. It takes years to come out. No one knows. So now suddenly they've got. It's so like the mafia, right? They're using all the RICO statutes.
Have they got a big, like at the FBI, they've got a wall with all the photos?
Yeah, they've started doing all of that. It's the US Justice Department. They've got top attorneys. They've got the IRS involved. They're all starting to map out and they realise there's huge amounts of money. They realise
it's like an operation, or they got a name for it.
Yeah, they realise these marketing companies and sponsorship companies are in on it. And they're just pulling threads, and suddenly everything's coming in. Like they're just going, "Oh, this is amazing!"
Okay.
So it's huge amounts of money moving around. 2012 starts to be a bad year for Sepp Blatter. So the Council of Europe, which is this group that has a bunch of parliamentarians that sit in Europe, and they've been presented by there's a Swiss prosecutor who has called Thomas Hildebrand, who's been looking into FIFA forever. He's this Swiss prosecutor in this tiny canton in Switzerland. No one pays him attention, but he's just slowly chipping away, and he becomes a big player even to this day.
I'm imagining him out the front of FIFA in a car with binoculars, like drinking a coffee. Yeah, it's just like a stakeout.
I don't. So from 2005 onwards, he is looking into FIFA, and even now he's got court cases. He's just lost one and appealing it against Sepp Blatter. So this guy's just constantly, going after him. And he finds out all about, remember, International Sports and Leisure, the big marketing company that kicked this all off. He's the one that uncovers all the stuff about Havelange and his son-in-law, Teixeira, taking all the kickbacks and the money and the things. And he actually gets them, takes them to court. This sort of starts to come out in 2012. In 2010, the court settles and finds Havelange is guilty, but then they sort of find out that really corporate espionage and corporate bribery isn't a crime in Switzerland, so they sort of let him pay a bit of money.
Bombshell.
And then they also agree we won't reveal the outcome of that court case. So no one knows about it. In 2012, it starts to come out. The Council of Europe, they interview Hildebrand and say, tell us about it. He tells them all about it. They come out and put out a very public report that says this is damning, and they say it's impossible that Sepp Blatter didn't know about all this. They said Mr. Blatter was technical director of FIFA from 1975 to 1981, FIFA general secretary from 1981 to 98, and has been its president ever since. Since FIFA was aware of the significant sums paid to certain of its officials, it is difficult to imagine that Mr. Blatter would not have known about this.
Well, correct. You're either the most incompetent or corrupt. You've got to be one or the other, which means you have to be removed.
Exactly.
Because that's the
way the whole thing. So at the same time, while this is all going on, the court case that ended in 2010, it comes out because journalists then take that. They know about it, the ruling in 2010 that Havelange is dirty, that Teixeira's dirty, and FIFA it had been suppressed, but they're petitioning the court saying other courts to appeal, and finally it all comes out. So this all comes out that Havelange and Teixeira had been accepting these. Remember it was like up to $50 million worth of bribes from ISL to them, right? Wow. So this all comes out. Sepp Blatter is, once again, the accusation is he must have known about it. But not that there's no evidence at this point that he took
any
paper
trail, there's no recorded conversations,
he's
there's
always
no witnesses.
One little step right. He admits at some point around this time, that he did know about these bribe payments made to the other FIFA executives, but he said they weren't illegal at the time. And then he says, because it wasn't a crime back then, so he says, I don't know why you expect me, and then he says, you can't judge the past on the basis of today's standards. Otherwise, it would end up with moral justice. I can't have known what about an offence that wasn't even one. That's what he said. Wow. So his whole thing was, they were taking bribes and kickbacks, but it wasn't illegal. Yeah. Now, morally, you could say, all that money should have gone to FIFA, not to the president, but...
Did the ethics committee rule on this?
The ethics committee, they look into it.
Yeah, okay, good.
Okay, we'll get to that. But Sepp's in the middle of trying to clean up the place and announce his big changes. So
he's gone transparent, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's all transparent, apparently. So he announces two guys to come in and clean up the whole place. So he announces that former United States Attorney Michael J. Garcia is going to come in, and a German judge, Hans-Joachim Eckert, they're going to join the organisation. Garcia's going to become the chief investigator for the ethics committee. So he's going to do all the investigations. And Eckert is going to be the chairman of the chamber that sort of is the judging chamber. They're the ones that the investigation will be done, then presented to the judge, basically. And this is going to all... He says they're going to have free reign. I'm changing the FIFA Code of Ethics. It used to have provisions that had time limitations. So if something happened 5 years ago or 10 years ago, you couldn't investigate. Yeah. He says it's all on the table. They can look at the 2018 and 2022 World Cups. They can look into the ISL stuff. Go at it, boys. Sheesh. And everyone says, this is amazing. They've really done it. At the same time, while this is going on, and they're now apparently doing all the thing, Blazer is sent by the FBI to the London Olympics and
With a wire.
with a wire, and tries to meet with people and get them to come to his apartment and try and basically say things like, "Hey, remember that time we had that bribe? Remember that?" And it's funny because you can read some of these, and some of them they're going, "What are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking. I don't remember that."
As if they were aware that
Yeah,
that
like
would be
they're
an
that
incriminating
cagey,
thought.
you know. They don't go for it. So, at the same time, though, around this as this goes on, as it gets towards 2013, Blazer becomes less useful because he gets colon cancer. He's in hospital. The feds can't use him as much. And he's not long for the world, to be honest. So that sort of happens.
Right.
He's announced he's going to be leaving the FIFA Exco in 2013. He was already on the nose with a lot of people by this point. CONCACAF, though, their integrity committee has started to look in because after Warner steps down, our good friend Jeffrey Webb, do you remember the guy who was the head of the Cayman Islands that got up at the conference and supported Sepp Blatter?
I do.
He's replaced Warner as head of CONCACAF. And he's got an integrity committee to look into it, and he gets them to look into Warner and Blazer. Right. And this is amazing. So David Simmons, who's the head of this integrity committee, presents to the CONCACAF Congress the results. He's done a 144-page report. He's interviewed everyone except Warner and Blazer, who both had refused. Yes. He got up in front of the conference and said, I recount a sad and sorry tale in the life of CONCACAF, a tale of abusive position of power by persons who assisted in bringing the organisation to profitability, but who enriched themselves at the expense of their very own organisation. The report alleges Warner did not disclose that when the $25.9 million Havilland Centre of Excellence, do you remember that got built it got built on land owned by Warner. So when he got sacked as president, CONCACAF don't own it. Warner owns it. So there's almost a $30 million, $26 million thing. So he figures out he's done that. So he says, we no longer own that. He's got it. He just did it.
Where he lives now.
Yeah. And he never told anyone that was the case, right? They also find out that Warner had set up secret bank accounts that only he controlled in the name of the CONCACAF that received deposits from FIFA and went to his benefit alone. So the money just was coming straight to him. Blazer, he received more than $20 million, this is all US, in compensation from CONCACAF in his time in business. He was 21 years there.
Yes.
17 million were in commissions while he was general secretary. This was the 10% he took on everything. So Blazer had worked, it was discovered in this report that Blazer had worked with a contract. He hadn't had a contract since 1998. He doesn't step down to 2011. There was no contract in place. He just worked off the rough agreement him and Warner had made out originally. And his compensation was only discussed 3 times at the top level.
So no one's ever seen any paperwork?
There is no paperwork. He doesn't have one, right? Warner knew he didn't have an employment contract or anything. He just worked, but no one cared. He never. So Blazer took 10% on everything CONCACAF did, not just what he did, on every bit of business that CONCACAF did. So that meant any sponsorship signed, 10% to Blazer. TV rights, 10%.
Straight the kick.
Ticket sales, 10%. Luxury suite income, 10%. Parking fees, 10%. Beers and hot dogs sold at the stadiums, 10% to him. Yep. So everything.
10% that he ate?
It all came into an internal account called commissions payable, right? He took 10% of the development money that was sent to the Confederation by FIFA. So FIFA said he took 10% of that. So when he convinced FIFA to give him $3 million to build a television production studio in Trump Towers, he took 10% on that. So even when
then they built it for him,
he still gets 10%, right? For years,
he's getting a commission off his own stuff. Wow.
For years, he also just lived off the corporate American Express card that CONCACAF paid for. So,
yes.
he used it for travel, meals, clothing, gifts, everything. They would pay the Amex bill in full, CONCACAF, so he didn't have to. He then would go through the statements and deduct anything he judged to be a personal expense and just take it from the commissions payable account. So he was never out of dime. Over a 7-year period, he racked up $26 million on this Amex.
Whoa! That's good going.
That's good.
Congratulations.
And despite a lot of it was a personal thing, he kept all that membership points for Amex for himself on top of that, right? So he had enough points to swap for 200 round-trip first-class tickets from the US to Europe. That's just the points he'd accrued, right? Wow. He did the same with rent. He paid everything on rent. He had the two adjoining units in Trump Tower on the 49th floor. Together, they cost him $18,000 a month. Well, they didn't cost him. They cost the Confederation.
Yeah.
One of them was used to keep his unruly cats. He didn't really go into it that much. It was just for the cats, right?
Oh, my God.
So he did all of that, right? So there was that. Rather than buy a car, he got CONCACAF to purchase a Hummer that only he used. He then bought condos in Miami and the Bahamas under CONCACAF's name, but only he had the keys, so no one else ever used them.
Yeah, cool.
So he did all of this stuff, right? So the report lays all this out. He also doesn't file tax returns not only for himself but for CONCACAF in the United States, which leads to that body losing its tax-exempt status as a non-profit organisation.
I just don't get how it's gone on for this long. I don't know how this has not come up on anyone's radar.
Warner fires back, but it's awkward when this report comes out because Warner has just been named, even though he stepped down from all these footballing things. Remember, he got voted as a minister, as a politician. He'd just been appointed Trinidad and Tobago's Minister for National Security, which oversaw, it's a cabinet position that put him in charge of the nation's police and fire service,
Oh, my God.
army, navy, coast guard, its prisons, and its immigration department. So
Perfect.
So
Couldn't go to a better man.
So anyway, eventually the Prime Minister of Trinidad comes out and says...
It was Jack Warner?
No. No, he said Warner had to stand there. So he stands there. So suddenly now he's got nothing. That report then comes out in April 2020. Additional information from that unsealed indictment shows that Warner received $5 million in more than 24 separate wire transfers to vote for Russia to host the 2018 Soccer Championship. So that's the evidence that he took the bribe for Russia. Right. They were sent from, there's wire transfers that added up to $5 million, was sent from 10 different shell companies in Cyprus, Anguilla, and the British Virgin Islands, and then cleared through correspondent US bank account. So that's how they did business.
The traditional route for above-board business.
So this report basically, this is the end of Warner and Blazer. Like they've done it. And just to cover it off, in July 12th, 2017, Chuck Blazer's lawyers announced he'd succumbed to all the various illnesses and passed away. Jack Warner is still alive but fighting extradition to the United States. So he's appealed to the UK, to the Privy Council in the UK, because it's a Commonwealth country, and he's waiting on that. Well, he's saying that it's all political and all sorts of stuff. He faces spending the rest of his life in jail if convicted in the US. The US are trying to get him. Yeah. So this kind of is where... those two had gone. And so suddenly Blazer and Warner are all gone. The FIFA ethics committee comes out and clears Sepp Blatter on the ISL stuff.
Good.
Which you would have known. Sepp then attends the May 23 63rd FIFA Congress. He's not being challenged at this one. He gets up. It's in Mauritius. He takes centre stage. He's very at this one promoting like fresh blood. Like we've got rid of Blazer's gone, Warner's gone, all these bad eggs have gone. I'm still here fixing everything. And you know what? We've got women coming onto the board. He sort of announces women and equality is his big push. He says that one of the candidates, Australia's Moya Dodd, he says she's good and good looking. That's how he describes her. And then he gets up at the Congress and he says, after all the voting, he says, "We now have 3 ladies on the board. Say something, ladies. You're always speaking at home. Say something now."
Wow. No filter.
So I think we might pause there.
Can we please
episode.
digest all that?
And when we come back, it's the real end. We'll finish
But two
off
of the big guns are gone.
But Jack Warner and Chuck Blazer finally gone.
Two of my favourites.
But we'll get into the last little bit, and the next bit really sees the the final house of cards come tumbling down.
Cannot wait. Thank you once again, Titus O'Reilly.
Thank you for listening to Sports Bazaar with Titus O'Reilly and Mick Molloy. We're on all the socials. Follow us there. If you'd like to leave a review on iTunes, it helps us out. And if you've got an idea for a story you'd like us to do or got some feedback, send an email to us. We're even on the electronic mail. It's info@sportsbazaar.com. See you next week.
Cheers.